Radio is fully funded and underwritten by the Greater Baton Rouge Building Trades and the Louisiana AFL-CIO. I'm Michael D. Day. Along with me this morning, I have Ed Parker, who is District Council 17 representative of ASME, and MP Ray, who is with Top Drawer Strategies, LLC, and it's government relations. And good morning, Ed and MP.
Good morning.
That would be Mary Patricia, if I remember correct.
Yes, named after both of my grandmothers.
And my daughter, Deanna Margaret, is named after both her grandmothers. DM Day, I guess.
Well, that's a credit to your character, and also shows that, like my mother, whoever chose her name was probably a good politician. Keep your mother-in-law happy and your mother at the same time.
I'm trying. So anyway, let's go over some of the legislative issues. I guess we could start again with Ed on the, I'll start with both. The checkoff for the state employees. Ed?
Well, Mike, you know,
God dog it. Okay, we got them all on now.
well, Mike, you know, that was House Bill 418, and it was very detrimental to teachers, school workers, public employees all across the state of Louisiana. And it's basically to do away with freedom of choice that was guaranteed under the Constitution for them to have their union dues deducted by payroll deduction, which is such a minimum or no cost to the state of Louisiana because they deduct other things such as home mortgages, vehicles, health care, United Way, supplemental insurances, so forth and so on. So to this in turn, Louisiana Business and Industry said that this was their top bill to push this year, was to cut out for their reasons, believing that money going to political PACs they felt was the wrong thing to do.
What are they?
They are Louisiana Business and Industry.
Yeah, political, right?
A political action group.
MP, what's your take on that?
Well, you know, this is the fourth or fifth year in a row that that lobby has pushed this as a priority, you know, fortunately, luckily, and not without a lot of work, it's the fourth or fifth year they've lost the issue, and you know, Ed mentioned that this maneuver would have been illegal had it passed, but
yeah, what is that? We didn't go into that. Not to cut you off, but Ed said something about that it's in the Constitution you can do this.
Well, it's not specifically
Or
provided for
mishear
in the Constitution that you can do payroll deduct. They didn't get that specific in the Constitutional Convention of 1972 or 3 or whenever that was. However, it's codified in Louisiana statute in a couple of different places. One place in statute specifies payroll deduction rights for teachers, and it talks about how many teachers you have to have that want to do it in a district before you're allowed, and then once you have that many, you're allowed to do it, and how it works. But the real reason that it's a constitutional issue is that it's an equal protection issue, because insurance companies, credit unions, the state retirement systems, private 401ks, they all do this. They all receive money from paychecks of state workers through payroll deduction. They all have PACs. They all have lobbyists. They all do political activity. And so if you were to say to the teachers union or to the firefighters union or to anybody else that they can't receive their dues via payroll deduction because they're engaging in political activity, but you continue to allow these other parties to do that, you would be discriminating against only one of many entities that do this political activity and receive their dues through payroll deduction. But the problem with that strategy is, and look, Bobby Jindal's lost a lot of cases in court, and he would get sued over this pretty quick. But the problem with that strategy is that, it really drains a lot of resources. And what it does is it forces labor to spend money on litigation instead of on services to membership.
And that might be the point that they're looking for.
It is. And look, in other states where they've passed payroll deduction bills, what happens is,
it's been overturned.
In some places it's been overturned, but what happens is that while it's being litigated, unions lose a third of their membership overnight. They have to go around signing everybody up via bank draft and credit card, and then what happens is they have to dedicate resources to becoming bill collectors when your credit card expires or when you change bank accounts. They've got to, and so it's just it's unfair. It's not productive. It's meant to be a distraction from doing what unions do, which is to provide services, education, and training for their members. Honestly, to do the job that government is failing to do in Louisiana right now, and I'll give you an example of that. The teachers' unions here in Louisiana conduct lots and lots of professional development for teachers because our Department of Education is not doing what they need to do to keep teachers up to date. And so a lot of teachers, they love the extra benefits they get from their union. They like the life insurance. They like the professional liability insurance. But at the end of the day, they need help to keep up with new curriculum. They need help to keep up with new classroom management strategies. And that's what unions provide. So that's the narrative that we try to keep going at the legislature every year when this bill comes up, is that, yep, we do political activity just like the banks, just like the insurance companies, and we do so much more with the dues that we get from our members, who are all, by the way, voluntary members in this right-to-work state, can quit anytime they want to. They absolutely send us their money voluntarily through their paycheck at no cost to local school districts, at no cost to state government. That bank draft or that payroll deduction, it happens just like it does through the retirement system.
Ed?
What MP's saying is the truth. There's virtually no cost to the state of Louisiana. It is strictly voluntary. Our members can get in and out as they choose. For whatever reason. And you look at all these insurance companies that have these super PACs, the banks, they give more to political candidates than the unions actually give. Now, as far as public employees go, they're covered by a Hatch Act, so they can't donate. Council 17 in the state of Louisiana does not donate money to political activities because our membership is covered by the Hatch Act. And the Hatch Act denies them that right, which is actually against the Constitution of the United States of America, under freedom of choice, freedom of speech. So
it would seem that way.
Well, it is that way, Mike. But we're living in a state with Bonaparte law, French law, and when the Hatch Act was introduced back in the late 30s and 40s, it has gotten to a point to where it's not working. Even Representative John Bell Edwards in 2008 introduced legislation to curtail the Hatch Act because it's outlived its usefulness. Because public employees do vote. They do go to the polls and they vote.
As far as the Hatch Act, I've heard it's even illegal for a government employee to put a sign in their front yard.
Mike, that is exactly right. They cannot put a political sign in their yard. They cannot put a political bumper sticker on their vehicle. So, to me, under the law in Louisiana, you're telling citizens what they can and can't do, which is highly illegal.
MP?
Well, I don't know if we've beat payroll deduction bloody and left it on the curb yet, but I hope that our listeners know how hard the AFL-CIO and its affiliates and all of the people that they send to the Capitol every day work on behalf of working people. And it's not just on payroll deduction. It's not just when Lobby attacks us. Look, Lobby had a lot of priorities this session, and almost all of them were detrimental to working people in our state. And I want to tell you that the results of that the AFL umbrella gets at the Capitol are really unprecedented. And you can do it by counting up the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry's losses this session. So they lost their move to get rid of the inventory tax. They lost their move to beat an equal pay bill. They lost their bid to have nothing passed that even remotely promotes Medicaid expansion. They lost payroll deduct. They, to a large degree, lost on the cigarette tax. They lost on other revenue-raising measures, and they just really got their butts beat this year. And that is not without a lot of hard work from people like Ed at AFSCME, from the teachers' unions, from the firefighters, the police, and from our brothers and sisters in the private sector unions. Like you, Mike, with the pipe fitters and the plumbers and the electricians and everybody. We're really a family at the Capitol, and we take care of each other. When one of us has an issue, we show up and we really have each other's backs.
But what do you really attribute it to? I mean, all these unions have been together on issues for a lot of issues, and just taking a butt kicking time after time. And I don't have to tell you guys that. You're up there every day fighting. But what would you really attribute to the inventory tax, $1.6 billion deficit, and something had to be done? Do you think it was just like a 911 call to these legislatures this year?
Mike, there was such a shortfall. And one of the key issues that
and yet the governor said no new taxes.
Well, here you have, since 2008, since this governor has been in office, you have had mid-year budget cuts.
And I'm reading you're going to have another one.
Oh, you're going to have them for the next several years. But when you have these mid-year budget cuts and you're saying, in Louisiana, the state legislature is required by law to pass a balanced budget. Budgets haven't been balanced. They've been a patchwork budget. Why? By a certain few to give the governor what he said he wanted. And it's been the governor's agenda. Now, I have to agree with what MP's saying. Louisiana Business and Industry, as a whole this year, have lost 90% of the bills that they were pushing.
Do you or MP attribute any of this to the new leadership, the Wagaspat? Did he overreach? Yeah,
that's more than any one person at the top. I would attribute it to just a total misunderstanding of where we were, in time and space politically, and a very, 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 very large overreach.
So it was an overreach on the dues checkoff. Who Ed said that was their number one priority for the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry.
Yeah, and part of the reason that it was an overreach, a big part is that, look, we got to acknowledge we're in an election year here. We are in an election year. There were already enough tough votes for people to take on the House floor, including raising revenues and all that people just don't want to have to deal with being accused of raising taxes and all that hooey. But they really also didn't want to have to take what I know the teachers union, for example, portrayed as a very anti-teacher vote. State workers as a very anti-state worker vote. So it was important to them that bill die in committee because it is an election year. So even the people who are kind of philosophically aligned with lobby on this issue and in any other year might not have minded taking a vote, for ending payroll deduction. They're not trying to piss people off 6 months before an election, 4 months before an election, when they want to come back to the legislature. And it's important, things like this radio show are really important because the reason that labor is losing the battle on a lot of stuff these past 20 years now almost is that we don't vote our interests. We're like a lot of groups. We don't always vote our interests, and so it's important to make sure our members are well educated. So I want to make sure that our brothers and sisters in labor who are listening to this show and the ones who aren't, they get the message that when they come after your state legislator saying that he or she raised taxes this year, you need to look at, first of all, whether that's true. Did they end a giveaway or did they create a new tax? Because the only new tax created this session was the cigarette tax. Correct. And you need to look at a whole lot more than what they did this past year. You need to look at where have they been on payroll deduction? Where have they been on teacher tenure? Where have they been on cost of living adjustments for retirees? Where have they been on equal pay for women and issues that really matter to working families in Louisiana? Where have they been on Medicaid expansion? And you can check their records out on a lot of this stuff with a simple Google of their name and the issue that you're looking for. On pension issues, you can always visit lapublicpensions.org, and that's the Public Pension Coalition website. It's lapublicpensions.org. It's a coalition of labor groups that work on public pension sustainability in Louisiana. And so, look, we've got to stay educated, and we can't be like the rest of the populace. If we vote based on a single issue, the way that everybody else does, we're going to get more of the same. We're going to get more of the same treatment that we've been getting. People who don't really care about working families. If you're only voting based on whether you like the cigarette tax or whether you like the cap on the movie industry, if you're only voting on based on one thing, you're going to get more of the same.
You're listening to Baton Rouge Labor Radio. We're on WTQT 106.1 FM, LPFM, and we're talking with Ed Parker, District Council 17, representative for ASME, and MP Ray, who is with
Top Drawer Strategies.
There you go. And
my mother tells me it sounds like a lingerie company.
So on the let's talk a little bit about the wedge issues. I didn't coin that phrase, but it's a baker that's selling cakes, and a gay couple walks into his public business, and he says, "Hey, it's against my religion to sell you a cake." How much weight did that pull with people with the legislatures this year?
Well, I mean, first you've got to talk about what was actually in the bill, because it really didn't have anything to do with the scenario that you just mentioned. Although,
oh, really? I'm wrong on that?
Well, that was the discussion that was had, I think, in the public about it. But look, what was filed was a bill that said that the government could not take any action against any business that refused to serve someone on the basis of a belief about marriage in general. So that would mean that as a lawyer, I could refuse to serve someone because they were on their second marriage, or because they were married by a justice of the peace, or because it was an interracial marriage. As a doctor, I could refuse to serve somebody based on those same beliefs that you had to be married. Maybe I believe that you should only marry a woman, so as another woman. So I'm not going to serve anybody who has I'm only going to serve people who are in a same-sex marriage. All it said was a belief about marriage. And so the problem with the bill was that it didn't do any of what you're talking. It didn't protect beliefs specifically enough, and that's why a lot of legislators had problems with it and didn't want to vote for it. Number one, because it was totally unconstitutional, and number two, because it really had very little to do with same-sex marriage at all, the way that it was drafted. And so, what the bill said is that if I refuse to serve somebody on a belief about marriage of any kind, any belief about marriage, like I thought, marriage was wrong, so I wasn't going to serve any married people, that the government couldn't take any action against me. And the reason that that's incredibly dangerous is you can't have paramedics refusing to serve people because they're in an interracial marriage or because they're in a gay marriage or for any reason whatsoever.
On that point, I'm going to tell you a true story. My niece, who has been married for 15 years, she's in Texas. They had a pharmacist refuse to fill her birth control. What year is this?
Well, in the Deep South, I think we're about back in 1965 or so. I was born in 1985, and of course, born a Yankee in the great state of Ohio. Moved to Louisiana in 2008, and we can make jokes about it, but in all seriousness, when you watch what happened in Charleston, South Carolina this week, it really does make one wonder if we aren't kind of going backwards, especially here in the Deep South.
Don't make me wonder. I know it.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Charleston things, I know we do labor issues here, but I mean, it's hard for me to picture someone going in, sitting in a prayer meeting for an hour, and then whipping out his gun and killing 9 people. And I think most of them were over 70 years old.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the statement that the young man, the suspect, made to police yesterday was that he almost didn't go through with it because everybody was so nice to him. I mean, obviously, you've got to some degree a level of mental illness that makes one susceptible to, I think, the racial undertones that really do exist here in the Deep South, and it obviously made him more susceptible to carrying out an act like that. But nonetheless, I know our governor, who's going to be announcing whether he's running for president on the 24th of June, so coming up really quickly, he made some comments yesterday about the president of the United States, and he said that the president was using this for a political opportunity. What's he
running for? What's Obama running for?
To my knowledge, he's going to go retire and plan his library.
He's going to parade around and make $200,000 speeches.
Yeah.
And he's not running for anything.
Well, the president said yesterday that, this was just more evidence that we really need to talk about reforms for gun control of some kind for people, especially for people that have demonstrated histories of mental illness, like the suspect in this case, who had tried
felony. He had a felony.
He had a felony.
He had felonies pending.
And he also had already been suspected of planning a violent event in the past. He showed up at a local mall asking a lot of questions about what time employees came in and out, which caused them to be suspicious. So they actually banned him from that mall. That was over a year ago. And so the president made this statement, which, look, we may agree with him, or we may not disagree, or we may not agree with him. But Bobby Jindal, who is running for something, he is going to be running for president.
For the state line, I hope.
Hopelessly.
Well, we almost renamed the SAVE Act the Dumb Act, right, in the legislature. And I heard.
Got to get into that before.
I heard a good joke the other day that we almost renamed the SAVE Act the Dumb Act, and Bobby Jindal's whole performance has been one big dumb act, and we're all waiting for the grand finale where he makes himself disappear.
Get back to this. Get back to this. Do you know in Louisiana, when Hillary Clinton is beating you in the poll numbers and you're so-called conservative Republican, you've got serious problems.
Yep. When Barack Obama is more popular than you as Bobby Jindal,
I'm
you
just
got
wondering
problems.
how my main man, Bernie Sanders, is doing against him, you know. But
and I'm sure we'll see some polls soon with Bernie.
Get you and Ed, get into the SAVE Act. I mean, this is the most, I've lived through, I guess I was born when Uncle Earl was governor. And I mean, we've went through some circuses here in Louisiana.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Please get into the SAVE Act.
I'll tell you what. I'll give the structure of the SAVE Act, and I'll reserve time for Ed to give an opinion about the SAVE Act. So our listeners know the SAVE Act was an attempt to make the budget revenue neutral.
Without doing it.
In order to please a big, out-of-state interests, the Americans for Tax Reform group led by Gerber Norquist, which says that, when you take that pledge, when you're someone like Bobby Jindal who takes the pledge with the Americans for Tax Reform group, you basically promise that for every time
lifetime.
It's a lifetime pledge, and every time that you raise a revenue, you will find an offset in order to make that revenue basically revenue neutral, not count for anything. So that essentially not only are you never going to raise any taxes, you're never going to repeal any taxes or stop giving away money through tax credits, exemptions, and rebates. So what the SAVE Act did is it created a fee that students at our public universities, which they never pay. Then it took the money that we already allocated for higher education and it gave it to the Board of Regents for higher education through a tax credit, even though the Board of Regents is a tax-exempt organization. So it's a fee that students never pay and a credit to a board that never pays any taxes anyways.
Who come up with this?
Somebody who wanted, who really needed.
That's the first time I've ever had you in here where you were lost for words. Okay,
that was done, Mike. That was done by the GOP group at the state capitol. That was part of an issue to save grace to Bobby Jindal, for him to come back and say for his presidential run that he did not raise taxes against the citizens of Louisiana.
Which he already could have said, because he didn't raise taxes. He stopped giving away tax dollars that we were going to give away. There's a total difference between raising a tax and repealing a portion of a credit. Mm-hmm.
And then he turned around. His opening speech to the state legislature on the 13th of April was, "We've got to stop corporate welfare." Now, take a look at SAVE, and the way MP described it, it's basically what equals out to a shell game. I'm not doing this, but I'm doing it over here. It creates a tax credit that goes to the student. The student turns it into the Board of Regents, and the Board of Regents then tries to get their money out of the state of Louisiana.
The money that we were going to allocate to them anyways. But the thing about the SAVE Act is it's a shell game, and Ed's totally right, and it's a shell game upon which our entire budget was contingent. Bobby Jindal promised that if we did not pass SAVE, he would veto our budget, which did restore funding to higher education and prevent deeper cuts. It mostly restored funding to health care. Although I'll tell you, yesterday we talked about the veto of the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, a little bit. There were other line item vetoes in the budget yesterday that are incredibly disturbing. Ed mentioned one for travel for the governor. We cut travel for the governor, and he took that cut out. The other thing is that he cut funding for neonatal intensive care units. So we have a governor who has, in the past, proposed cutting things like dental care for women that are pregnant, which is very important during pregnancy, right? He's proposed cuts for things like wound care for diabetics who don't have health insurance. He has made many cuts to mental health for people who don't have health insurance, which has made us all less safe. Our ER here in Mid-City is closed. I live in what I refer to as the death zone here in Baton Rouge, where I've got to go all the way over to Our Lady of the Lake and probably sit in about a 3-hour line if I do something simple like dislocate my shoulder or break a bone in my arm. He is the kind of person who will voluntarily line item cut out of a budget care for newborn babies that are sick. That is the kind of person. Forget politician. That is the kind of human being who people elected twice to run the state of Louisiana, and we have got to do better than that.
Now, I mean, some of this is just mind-boggling. I mean,
Wait, if you think it's mind-boggling, how can you sit there and you're going to cut care to disabled children in the state of Louisiana with the now waivers? Now, they did increase them somewhat, but normally, when you're telling the disabled children of this state that I'm cutting your care, you can't get the help you need, and we're talking about small children that are on O2, oxygen 24/7, that have to have that home health care worker come in and assist them, and you're cutting it. So when you have a governor that has no sympathy for the citizens of Louisiana, I got a few choice words to say, but I will not say them on radio because this governor, to me, is a human piece of crap when you're going to hurt a child.
Now, today, yesterday I read that 2 of Bobby Jindal's longtime aides have resigned, and they're going to work on his presidential campaign.
Yesterday was.
How long do you think that job's going to last?
Well, the election's, the second Tuesday in November?
Oh, man. This guy's not even going to get the Fox debates.
Yeah.
He's going to be debating outside Fox Studios on the sidewalk.
Right. Well, Jindal has set up his Washington think tank a while ago, his foundation.
So they'll work for that.
Well, I'm sure they all have plans. And look, folks like Kyle Plotkin, his current chief of staff, he stated yesterday that it was his last day with the governor's office, and he was heading to Iowa to work on the campaign. I think most people don't make a decision like that unless they have a long-term plan. You know.
This was just posted yesterday. Scott Angel is running for governor of the state of Louisiana. Scott Angel was
a Jindal clone.
He was Bobby Jindal's lobbyist.
Right, and his chief of staff at one point in time. And this was just posted. Angel shares responsibility for Jindal's failures and refusing to lead. This is the kind of man that you're running for governor of the great state of Louisiana that helped lead the attacks on working men and women of this state?
And will continue to do so.
Well, that's the problem with the field in the governor's race, really, is that, you've got a bunch of choices out there that are really the equivalent of a Bobby Jindal third term. You've got a guy that was his lobbyist. You got a guy that, a big fan of the movie industry, all right, Jay Darden, who was his stunt double. And you've got David Vitter, who is pretty much just Bobby Jindal on steroids.
Do you guys know what Jay Darden's son does for a living?
I do not.
No.
Stand-up. Stand-up comedy.
Really?
That
that explains why he always has such good jokes for the Gridiron every year.
Well, it could
Jay has
be,
a lot of good jokks.
Because there was one year...
I did see that on Twitter the other day.
Yeah,
that his
well,
son
this was, 4 or 5 years ago, his son pulled a prank. I forget on who. I don't think his son has the same political views as the father. Okay?
Well, you know,
And that's my nightmare. My 3.5-year-old, I try to keep her away if Jindal's on TV. I don't want to get her influenced.
well, you know, everybody is sitting there, and you know, Scott Angel is running his ads on TV and radio.
Right. He's a good Christian man.
Yeah.
Well, he's running an ad about how much he supports women, and he's one of the head lobbyists that was in charge of beating equal pay for women several years in a row. You know, that's
so you're sitting here, you're talking.
I don't know how Christian that is, because that's not very honest.
You're talking, you know,
Well, all women don't want equal pay.
But you,
I'm just going to laugh. You know, I really want to do the same work as you and get paid less. That's what I really want. That's my biggest, hope.
you know, and I got to say this, Mike, I'm for equal pay for women.
I am also.
You know, we sit here and we listen to what the candidates are saying.
Having fun with MP.
We have a Bobby Jindal on steroids and David Vitter. We got Scott Angel, who is nothing more than a third term of Bobby Jindal. You have Jay Darden, who, as lieutenant governor, has done some good things for Louisiana, but I don't see him as the one to help bring Louisiana out of what we're in after 8 years of cuts.
One of Jay's ads the last time he ran for lieutenant governor, this is a line straight from the ad. He looks right at the key. First of all, let me note for all of our brothers and sisters in labor out there, in the commercial, he drives down a long, windy, kind of bayou road with beautiful oak trees lining it in a foreign car, okay? He gets out of the car, and he looks straight into the camera, and he says, "Help me help Bobby Jindal sell Louisiana."
So there we have
They're
it.
selling it.
Wait a minute.
Literally.
Lock, stock, and barrel. Now,
To the lowest bidder.
Try to sell it to the parking lot downtown. Huh? I mean,
And I know for a lot of
what
voters,
happened with that?
Oh, they did not end up selling that.
parking lot.
Why not?
Well, because it was going to be sold for, just like a lot of the properties downtown. There was an old state office building downtown. The same thing happened to the privatization, the selling of the charity hospital system ended up costing us way more than we saved. Billions more than we saved.
Well, I'm waiting for old Jindal to try to throw the statue of Huey P. in front of the Capitol on eBay, man. How much could you get for that?
Here he is, but his administration has so much state land and state property to where this governor, they sold 30,000 acres out in the western part of the state, property that owned by DHH. They sold it for $30,000. They sold another 200 and something acres up in East Feliciana. That was a feedlot that belonged to Department of Corrections. They sold that. They sold land down in St. James Parish. So this governor has a track record of selling off state assets. And the funny thing is, the Attorney General give a ruling that the governor cannot sell a state asset, but he can lease that asset out. So if he could have sold the charity hospitals to these private companies, he would have.
Well, and the leasing scheme that he entered into is actually going to, and that's what's holding up approval by the Center for Medicaid Services.
Right.
So the federal government has not yet approved our plan for privatization. DHH and Bobby Jindal continue to operate as though it has been approved by the federal government, and they're going through an appeals process. But ultimately, we're going to owe many, many, many hundreds of millions of dollars to the federal government because of our decision to proceed in a way that they deem is not compliant with federal law. And that's because we had a system of what's referred to as advanced lease payments, where people pay for use of the hospital way up front, and it guarantees them use even if they're not doing the things that we're supposed to do later on in the plan. And I would note that, they claimed that this was going to save us money. Representative John Bell Edwards, who's also running for governor, over a year ago said, look, people, our plan's not being approved. Why don't we go ahead and put this money that we're going to owe in trust so it will be there when it's time to pay it? We can earn interest on it while it's sitting there. And then, 2 or 3 years from now, when the federal government assesses us a huge fee for this crap, this illegal stuff, we won't have to cut health care in order to afford the payments. But, of course, the legislature didn't go along with that very sensible plan.
Speaking of John Bell Edwards, and you work for John Bell Edwards
I
as
do.
a consultant.
So I've outed my bias.
Yeah, you're out of the closet here.
Well, Mike, let me put a little feather to what MP's saying. I have the utmost respect for John. He is one of the most, and I told him this in 2008, one of the most refreshing people, state legislators, to come into that state capitol. He was honest, straight up, told you what was on his mind, told you what would work for the citizens of Louisiana, optimistically opposing privatization, to where DHH in 2008 was going to privatize a public facility. John Bell took up the fight, not knowing anything other than it was in his district. He took up that fight and succeeding in beating the general administration.
Huh. Well, go ahead.
In reference to that, since then, I've grown nothing but respect for that young man. I look at John Bell as the future of Louisiana to bring the people back together.
And my point being on John Bell Edwards, who has been to the Plumbers and Steamfitters Union Hall on 2 occasions, to the retirees dinners and stuff such as that, where you probably didn't have 50 people there, which says a lot. I mean, and I will say this, I've been a member and a regular union meeting attendee when I wasn't working out of state or something since 1974. And John Bell Edwards has been there twice, and since 1974, we've had one sitting senator that came when her hair was on fire, okay? And I'm just being truthful here. But John Bell Edwards, he's pro-life, he's pro-gun, he's a West Point grad, which you don't get many of those. So, seems to me like that would take care of all the wedge issues that we seem to have difficulty with electing people with down here or in the Deep South. Most people are, a lot of people are animate pro-life, to the point they don't care what's written, what ruling the Supreme Court ruled or anything like that. But it would seem like that would cover the wedge issues.
Yeah, well,
And that people would say, well, you know what? He's right on course with the guns I can cling to my guns and cling to my Bible.
Well, as John Bell says, I own more guns than I would ever need. But
as Phil Graham, are you familiar with Phil Graham?
Yes.
Let me do my Al Franken of Phil. Al won't do this anymore. I have more guns than I need, but less guns than I want. And look, for this for this disclaimer too. I own guns. Okay?
Well, me too.
I own guns, and I'm not looking for somebody, for Barack to come knock on my door and say, hey, Mike, gotta have that gun, you know? And, you know, if a person can walk down, if a person like I've seen on TV can go to a presidential town hall meeting with a damn AK strapped to their back, I don't think you got much problems having guns in this country.
It doesn't seem that way.
Yeah.
But, you know, you talked about wedge issues, and look, I think there's a lot of people out there with this sentiment, you know, and this is just shooting straight, this sentiment. I like John Bell, but I just don't think he can win. I just don't think he can win, and I don't really vote for Democrats. And
Right.
and here's why those people are about to get surprised. Because when it comes, John Bell Edwards is going to be in a runoff with David Vitter. On October 25th, we're going to wake up with less than a month to go till the runoff date on November 21st, and there's going to be two choices for every person in Louisiana. There's going to be David Vitter, and let me just tell you from a woman's perspective, there's going to be two choices. There's going to be David Vitter, who answered the call of prostitutes from the floor of the House of Representatives,
Now,
and then
wait a
there's
minute.
hang
Hold
on, you got to let me finish my really good line though, Mike.
Go ahead.
From the perspective of a woman, there's going to be two choices. There's going to be David Vitter, who answered the call of prostitutes from the floor of the House of Representatives, and there's going to be John Bell Edwards, who answered the call of his country, served on active duty for 8 years, and has been married to the same lovely woman for 26.
Okay. My question is, and I have it on very good sources on this matter, that David Vitter tipped those hookers real good. So you can't say he's not for equal pay for women, okay? Diaper Dave tipped the hell out of them.
Well, you know, and look, obviously we can make a lot of jokes about that, but in all seriousness,
you gotta make jokes about
well,
it.
you do. You have to laugh about it. But I also hope that our listeners and all voters are going to take a serious look at both the candidates,
You know,
because when they
go
do,
ahead. Go ahead.
when they do, it makes the choice really easy.
I got
Can you-
two great guests here.
Can you
on
really,
WTQG 106.1.
Mike? Can you really trust what David Vitter says? Hell no. The man
He's
is
working across
antagonistic.
the aisle with Elizabeth Warren
Yeah.
in the last 2 months.
For what reason? For what reason? Because
Oh, I don't
David
know
Vitter knows. David Vitter knows in the state of Louisiana, he's got to split the vote.
David
And get
Vitter
this.
couldn't beat Bernie Sanders in the Senate with Republicans on a popularity contest.
I agree.
And David Vitter has been tagged as the sixth least productive member of Congress during his time there.
And that's why you're getting all the action.
He's very obstructionist. And look, we could talk all day about his record on women's issues, his record on things that would have brought more business and industry to Louisiana. But the bottom line is, we don't have to be negative, because we have a choice in this governor's race that if we set aside party for a moment. Which isn't a problem for me, but if it is, set it aside for a moment. Take a look. This is a guy who he fought for and won personally $210 million in increases to public education, the only teacher pay raises during the Bobby Jindal administration. He's personally, he was the first co-author to the COLA bill that we passed this year. He's been fighting relentlessly for veterans in the state of Louisiana as a veteran himself. He's a true champion of public education. That's been one of his biggest issues. He's fought deep cuts to higher ed. I mean, there's plenty of great positive things to talk
How much is he paying you a
about.
week to say this? No, I'm kidding.
Well, no, actually, I'm glad you asked me that, because for almost 2 years, I was a very enthusiastic supporter of John Bell Edwards and volunteered a lot of time.
I'm just having fun.
Well,
Look,
we have a very lean campaign, so not very much, I promise
Here's the
you.
deal. Here's the deal. I'll give you a perfect example of a woman voter out there in Livingstone Parish. Been knowing this woman for a long time. Her husband was my sponsor in AA. And I knew her husband when we both didn't really care about AA about many years ago. over in North Baton Rouge, you know. But and God rest his soul, you know, he got in a bad car wreck, and so the woman's out there. She's a lawyer. She's got 2 kids. God, guts, guns, the American flag, conservative as you can possibly get.
She fits right in Livingston Parish, right?
Livingstone Parish, as I call it. But what I'm saying is, we were chatting on Facebook about the governor's race, and I told her, I says, well, everything's looking, I got to vote for this John Bell Edwards guy, you know, because I am a no-party guy, okay? Proudly no party. And like Bernie Sanders. She says, oh, you know, John Bell Edwards is from where? Amy.
Right.
Okay. And, oh, I love John Bell Edwards. Da, 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 da. He's such a nice guy, you know. And, I mean, apparently she really does know better than me, John Bell Edwards. And, I mean, she couldn't go on enough. And I said, yeah. I said, don't you find it funny someone that conservative is a Democrat? She says, man, you know, that really, I don't know if I can vote for him. I really don't. She says, I know him. I know, you know, this, that, the other. I just can't stomach voting for a Democrat. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. People just can't get by that.
Well, women like her, though, when we poll them, what we see is that they can stomach voting for John Bell Edwards a lot better than they can stomach voting for David Vitter for a lot of reasons. Not just because of, and I joked about it earlier, not just because of his serious sin. And look, John Bell Edwards will tell you the reason that he's not a Republican is because a prime example of the reason he's not is because he's not the kind of person who voted for somebody for governor who cuts funding for sick newborns, and that he has never been a member of a party and never will be where the leadership does things like that. And the Democratic Party is not that party.
No, they're not. They're not. They do a lot of things I don't like, but they do a lot of things.
So that's a good anomalous example, and we get a lot of anomalies like this all the time, especially among parents of special needs students. They come to us and say, "I've never voted for a Democrat, and I can't wait to vote for John Bell Edwards." You know, and so that's all. It feels good. It's all anomalous, but look, we've seen the trends in the polls. The 7th poll in a row came out yesterday, showing not only is John Bell going to make a runoff, but he is the best situated to beat David Vitter.
Business report.
No, the poll that came out this week was paid for by the Republican blog, The Hayride, and it was done through Marbleport polling. But look, that's the 7th Republican poll that has showed not only is he going to make the runoff, but that he is within striking distance. And here's what I want to say too: the reason John Bell Edwards is going to win, he's got low name recognition, right?
Right.
That's his biggest.
No money.
That's his. Well, that's not true at all.
David Vitter type money.
Yes, and here's why: because he can do what David Vitter can do for 20 cents on the dollar. I'm serious.
Okay.
But here's why John Bell Edwards is going to win, because David Vitter is never going to break 47% ever, no matter what he does, ever. And there's a lot of people that are going to go, and they're highly motivated to vote.
People say that about John Bell Edwards. Can't break 45%.
Well, when you've got 100% name recognition, everybody knows who David Vitter is, and you're sitting at 33% and can't get above it. That's a serious problem with 4 months to go. Nobody knows who John Bell Edwards is, and 3 polls have showed him in a statistical tie with David Vitter. He leads among white independents.
Why do I argue with this woman?
He leads in the Baton Rouge market.
The facts are the facts.
Why do I argue with this woman?
Matter of fact,
I don't even try.
back in March, when one of the first polls was released, John Bell was only within 1.5 percentage point next to David Vitter. So you got a guy here that's going to do the right thing for the citizens of Louisiana and bring us back to the forefront where we need to be.
Well, bring us back at least where we were at, right? You know?
No, bring us back to the forefront and put this state back where we need to be, doing work as government should for the citizens of Louisiana instead of the conservative few.
Okay, so we got about 2 minutes. MP, give us your last spiel, and then we'll go take a minute, give Ed a minute.
Well, I just want to take
30 seconds.
I just want to take my last 30 seconds to plug the Louisiana Public Pension Coalition. I'm a proud representative of that group at lapublicpensions.org. You can check out all the legislation from this past session, what passed, what didn't. We had a lot of good success. And I'd also like to plug my company, Top Drawer Strategies. We do political consulting. We do lobbying. You can find us at topdrawerstrategies.com.
Hey, Dr. Johnson. Ed?
Well, Mike, it's been an interesting hour. I think hats off to MP and the Louisiana Pension Coalition. They worked hard with Representative Sam Jones on HB